Hey, I'm Michael Ashley, and welcome to the Ash Cafe. Okay, so hey, welcome. I wanted to welcome everybody to today's show. We have Alex Yakubov, who is the VP of Marketing Operations at Yubico. Alex, thank you for coming on today. I know that the students, we're in an operations management class, and we're talking a lot about operations, and we talk a little bit about marketing, and some of the things that people think about marketing is that it's just all about brand or positioning or demand gen and things like that. And so when you think about marketing operations, it's a little bit different. So can you maybe just introduce yourself a little bit to everybody, and then tell us kind of what does a marketing operations person do?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you. And hi, everybody. Yeah. So, do they call you Professor?
No.
What do they? I know you as Mash, but
Yeah.
thanks for having me. We work together at Yubico. Yeah, and my role at Yubico has actually changed quite a bit since I joined. When it was a much smaller startup, I think I was employee 38 or 39, something like that. It was the first business marketing hire, and that just meant that we had some people that were doing the cool things in marketing that people think of, like all the branding and design work. We had somebody that was doing communications and PR type things, so telling all the stories with journalists. And they hired me, and they were like, "We are trying to go after a B2B audience. None of us know how to do that. Help us figure it out." And so I've been with the company a little over 4 years now. And now in my current role, I am working on marketing operations. And it's different from what most people know about marketing in that uh, we, at its core, it's about people. It's about processes and the technology that actually enables the marketing team to operate efficiently, and to actually scale with quality and consistency. So a lot of times people think that marketers aren't technical. And that actually is not true at all. Even our creative people are highly technical. Think about using Adobe Creative Suite and Photoshop, InDesign, whatever it might be. It's technology. And so on the operations side, the operations managers do a lot of the behind the scenes work. So depending on the organization, they might focus on strategy and processes. They may also focus on execution, and sometimes it's both. For a lot of business to business or B2B organizations, marketing ops managers usually have their hands in the business's lead management process.
Mm.
And what that means is individuals that have raised their hands and said, "Hey, I'm interested in your product or in your service, whatever you're selling." And that's called a lead. And sorry if I'm going
No,
too
no, no.
basic.
This is great. This is great.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so those people that raise their hand and say, "Hey, I'm interested," they go into the marketing database. So again, a technical component, and might be some automated technologies. So if you think about anytime you've signed up for a service, like maybe Spotify, that's one that I can relate to. I think anyone can relate to this. You'll periodically get an email from Spotify telling you about what artists you may be interested in, you've heard of before, or artists that you like. They've got a new album coming out, or they're doing some sort of fundraiser. That's all marketing automation.
Okay.
Yeah. So the ops manager is going to be working with those technologies, and they're going to live in the data in order to conduct different analyses, which are often used to report on performance and to help the company plan for the future.
I see. I see. So like you talked about process a couple times there, and one of the an entire section that we dedicate we're dedicated to learning about is process and process analysis in operations, and we talk a lot about kind of the role of going into an organization and then maybe doing a process analysis, like looking at what are all the steps that it takes to do something, and then seeing, can you remove some of those steps? Can you change? Can you make them faster? Can you make them slower? So is that kind of like what you're talking about? Like you're talking about developing leads and kind of doing those things. I could imagine that there's probably a whole lot of steps that you have to go through to kind of to do this. Is that the kind of process analysis you're talking about, like the operations person would do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be one of the things. I think, especially during the middle of the pandemic right now, everyone's kind of floundering and trying to figure out how can they keep their business afloat. And so that's where the marketing operations person is super, super critical, because they can go in and help you understand as a business leader, and other leaders in other departments, of like what your funnel looks like, or what your cycle, depending on how you want to define your sales process. Some people think of it as like a continuous loop. And other people think of it as like a funnel, like a beer funnel. I don't know. I'm trying to relate here. That I'm like,
I remember those funnels. That was,
yeah,
I actually partially remember those funnels. I guess that's more honest.
yeah,
Um,
partially, exactly, yeah. But you put stuff in and stuff comes out, and
yeah,
some of
yeah.
it goes in and some of it doesn't go in, right? It ends up on the floor. But you can try to drive for efficiencies, right? So that less does end up on the floor and more of it ends up where you want it to go, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
hopefully in the form of cash, customers.
Well, you brought up the pandemic, so let's just jump right into the pandemic, because this is something that's really interesting. It's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to study operations during a totally insane time like this. And so I remember it must have been maybe late February or something like that. All of a sudden, everything started happening. It was like, you can't come into the office. Conferences were canceled. Sales meetings were delayed, contracts were delayed, like all these things started to happen. How did the pandemic kind of affect you personally? Like, how did you hear about it? What were some of the immediate things that kind of happened to you? How were you affected by the pandemic?
So it's one of those, that's a really good question. It like reminds me of when people ask, like, where were you when JFK got shot? And I was not born yet. Or like, where were you on 9/11? I very vividly remember where I was on the day of 9/11.
Yeah.
And for the pandemic, I very vividly remember being, so there were two events. The first was in January when we had our sales kickoff event. All of us were together in Monterey Bay. And one of our leaders had gotten sick, and we'd already kind of heard rumors of this like thing happening in China. And he had been to China, and so all of us started speculating, like, ooh, maybe he forgot to put the lime in his Corona. Like, was the joke that was going around for all of us. Little, like we really should not have been joking about it in hindsight. And then again, I was at the RSA conference, which is an industry event for the security industry, in San Francisco. And I live in Oakland, so I was taking BART into San Francisco every day for a week. And the pandemic hadn't quite jumped over to the US just yet. It had in like little bits and pieces, but people were still very ignorant of like what that meant for a lot of things. So like we had another event at Yubico a few years back where somebody had gotten the flu, and it made its way through like I think like a third of the company had gotten sick from this, right?
Yeah.
And so we'd always carried a lot of hand sanitizer around with us, and so that was something we'd brought. But in terms of like my role, what it initially meant was like any sort of projections that we had around lead generation were likely going to be wiped out, or we just couldn't count on them anymore. So we started thinking about, we had to think about alternative ways to get in front of prospective customers without asking them to get on planes. I actually remember one of the people on our team, we went as far as actually plan out four separate in-person sessions in larger cities where our enterprise sales reps would recruit prospects to attend a half-day session. And the idea was like, we knew, so in our minds at the time, very early on, we're like, well, people are going to be cautious, and they're probably not going to get on planes where you're going to be more at risk, but they probably wouldn't mind getting in their car and driving 10 miles down the road and just keeping a distance and using hand sanitizer. So we usually planning events like that can take a year, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. We planned 4 of them in a matter of like 2 days. And of course we ended up switching them out like a week before to virtual sessions, because every day we're learning more, and you just have to be adaptable and kind of, I don't know, make some educated guesses. Our reps were still able to connect with the prospects, and they got to network with I think the prospects got to network with their peers. And early on, there were a lot of people saying, yeah, what the heck is going on? It's good to see people, even though it's virtual. They just were, I think everyone is suddenly stuck in their homes, and
Yep.
that was very different for a lot of people. So early on, they were super excited for those virtual sessions.
Yeah.
Now, now we're learning the other end of it, which is this is going on a lot longer than we thought. People aren't doing virtual events as much as they used to. We've got to find another way to engage.
Interesting. Really. So one of the topics that we studied just last week was forecasting. And actually you talked about, all your numbers went out the window. So to continue business though, you still need data, you kind of still need to make estimates and stuff. So how did you make up numbers? Like, so how do you change your forecast? Okay, you made them up.
That's just kidding.
But you know what I mean? How do you change a forecast like that? So you kind of base all your numbers on previous years and cycles, and you kind of know like, this is what's going to happen. And then COVID hits and you have to throw all your numbers away. Like, how do you come up with any kind of realistic, forecast?
So we look at like worst case and best case scenario. And with the nice thing about an enterprise sales cycle is that it's a lot longer than a consumer purchase cycle, where they might enter and exit the funnel within a matter of a few hours or a day, maybe a couple of weeks if it's a more higher end purchase. But with an enterprise purchase where they're spending hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million+, those cycles take a long time. And your sales rep has usually multiple contacts within an organization called the buying committee. And so they have their finger on the pulse of like, if they're doing their jobs correctly, they're talking to the customer, they are they're reaching out and saying, hey, how are you handling all of this stuff? Like, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help? And they're able to change the status of the forecast of where they think, that sales deal might land. They can push the date out, they can pull it in, they can change the amount, they can change their confidence level. So, we've got a really smart analyst on the team that took a look at that and did like a worst case scenario, like, assume that half of, what's your normal close rate, and assume that like half to maybe 60% of that falls through. Mm-hmm. Worst case scenario. And then best case scenario is like everything is normal, like no change whatsoever. You don't want to like go the opposite direction and say if all of it closes, because like that is a bit of false hope, I think. I think I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to the analytic side of things, but I know the questions to ask of somebody who is much smarter in the data and the numbers.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the ways of forecasting that we talk about is the Salesforce composite, which is you basically have to talk to the salespeople. They have their fingers on the pulse, they're talking to the buyers. And so you kind of have to just trust them that they have the experience and the knowledge, and they can start to kind of tell you, what they think is going to happen. I remember when Apple, I think maybe they were one of the first big companies that downgraded their forecast. This was, after the stay-at-home orders and stuff like that, or what it was. And then everybody started freaking out like, wow, this is really, affecting the big companies. So like, from your perspective, this was happening to you, and you're changing the ways that you're reaching out to customers and the processes that you're using, and coming up with creative ways to stay connected. How about your customers? Like, what kind of feedback were you getting from them? What was happening in the rest of the world? These enterprise companies and stuff, how are they handling it? Were they freaking out and just kind of shutting their doors and trying to protect themselves, or were they also still trying to come up with creative ways to kind of keep business moving?
So real quick, I want to touch back on the forecasting thing too. There are some other earlier indicators too that you can look for. So not just with talking to your own salespeople, but other metrics like how's your website traffic looking? Is it still as high as it used to be? Are you seeing it go up? Is it going down? And conversion rates on your lead forms and things like that. So that's some other indicators that you can start to see what the delta is, what the change is on all those other metrics, given like things are normal, right?
I see.
So I just wanted to close the loop on that. In terms of like what customers' reaction to all of it was.
Wait, because you brought that up and now it's super cool. I want to ask some more about that. So let me just see if I understand what you're saying though. So because there were sort of these intangible things happening and you had to change your numbers based on, like the sales or whatever, there were still tangible things happening like website traffic and website orders. And you're saying that you could look at the actual things that were happening, and then you could kind of apply that to the rest of the business. Is that what you're saying? So like if web traffic and orders went down 20%, then you could probably kind of estimate that the rest of the orders would go down 20, kind of, that's what you're saying?
Yeah, and maybe not like immediately, but down funnel, like or down the line, right? And a future quarter. So the finance team and the analysts will definitely have, like, they'll understand forecasting in terms of what the past has looked like, given all other variables stay constant. And so, yeah, from a marketing operations standpoint, we have access to different data that we can look to and measure change over time. And what if we applied the same percentage changes that we would have seen without the pandemic, what would that have looked like versus what did it look like?
Yeah.
And this is true of like a lot of different marketing things that aren't digital. So like we ran some radio ads this year, which is something Yubico has never done before. And there is no digital component to listening to the radio in your car. Or so it's unlike if you watch something on YouTube, we've captured technical data that can tie you and cookie you in to other things.
You think they're not listening to you in your car.
Okay. Apparently, the Xfinity remote has a vulnerability that can be exploited to listen in on how many times I've asked it to take me to Netflix.
That's hilarious. I've given up on trying to protect my privacy right now. Actually, it's insane.
Don't get that.
But well, that's awesome. And marketing operations in these areas is so critical. And I think we were kind of leading a little bit into sort of like what the rest of the world, how the rest of the world is sort of reacting to this. But before we go there, because you've kind of touched on it a little bit more in sort of these other areas of your business, is there anything that you noticed that happened as a result of the pandemic that was unexpected? Like you talked about web traffic, and kind of would expect like, maybe sales would go down across the board. Was there any area where you were like, wow, sales went up or sales went down, or people are doing this and we didn't expect that, or there's a whole new kind of thing happening? Was there anything like that happened?
Yeah, we had just announced in January a product called UB Enterprise Delivery. That might hit home for you because I know you helped work on that portal. So normally the way that it works with a business is that like they make a large purchase, let's say 100,000 keys, right? And they've got 50,000 employees. Every employee is going to get 2 keys. And typically the operational side of that, the deployment side of that is like, the employee shows up at an office location for a day if they're remote, or they come to their normal office location, and then it's just like getting a new badge. So if you've ever lost your SJSU badge to get around campus, you have to go to the IT help desk and they issue you a new one. So you're going to go to IT help desk and they're going to issue your UB keys, and then you're going to go on your merry way. Well, when everybody is suddenly distributed and you're working from home, and for safety reasons, they don't want you coming into the office, then suddenly Yubico getting the keys directly to the employee rather than the IT help desk having to suddenly be like, maybe your students won't know this reference, but there's an episode of Seinfeld where George's fiance is licking all of the envelopes to send to her to their invites out for their wedding, and she dies from like the glue poisoning. I just imagine all the IT help desk people sending 50,000 of those out. We launched this product that enabled us to do that for them. And that just shot through the roof, which in hindsight, we should have been like, well, duh. Yeah, everyone's going to need this now because everyone's working, or not everyone, but a lot of people are working from home. So that went up a ton, especially because if you were still using firewalls and people were accessing the network on premise and they couldn't do that anymore, suddenly from a security posture standpoint, that got blown apart. So there's this concept in information security known as the CIA triad, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Mm-hmm. So you want all of your resources to be confidential. You want them to be accurate, like in terms of integrity, you want them to not have been messed with by somebody mm-hmm. else, and you want them to be available. If your employees can't get access to them, like there's chances are one or more of those things were no longer true for you, and you had to make a switch, and suddenly digital transformation or this movement to the cloud and all these other things get accelerated. So I just went on a bit of a tangent, but
no, that's perfect. Actually, it brings up this idea that the pandemic and working from home didn't just affect sort of business sales cycles. It changed like the nature of business. It changed even like people's awareness of security. For example, at San Jose State, we went to multi-factor authentication like immediately. And they went with Duo, I think, which is a partner of Yubico's. And I, of course, the first one who used my YubiKey with Duo, because it is ridiculous that you have to go looking for some passcode somewhere on some app or something to, get into anything. And so now every time I'm with anybody and they see me touch my YubiKey, they're like, whoa, how did you do that? But yeah, this whole acceleration of security, I could imagine, happened when everybody had to work remote as well.
Yeah, there were a lot of customers that I think were just looking to anyone for answers, or at least ideas to keep their businesses operating securely. And so for I think a lot of high tech customers, a lot of them were able to enable most of their employees to work from home on like day zero, right? A lot of them probably worked from home on Fridays because we all live in the Bay Area, and let's face it, Friday traffic, like we've lived through it Monday through Thursday, right? But for healthcare customers, many of them had to deal with an influx of temporary workers coming in from like out of state. So I know this hit New York quite a bit. I have some friends back on the East Coast who are doctors not in New York, and some that were doctors in New York, and they were medical students that were in their last year of residency. And there's some laws in the medical side of things that in times like this allow them to give temporary licensure to retirees or like students that are near finishing everything, because they just have to in order to make things work. So they had very different challenges and things to focus on. But again, it goes back to that balance of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization's data. So they were just trying to figure out how to keep things moving, whether you're an essential business or not. Because even if you're not an essential business, like your business is essential to you, because that's paying your bills and allowing you to pay your employees who need to be able to pay their bills.
Yep. Yeah. This idea of like integrity kind of plays into another topic that we talk about. As a matter of fact, this week, we're going to talk about quality. And quality is something, in operations that some people say, that there's no way, we're never going to sacrifice quality. We're always going to have the highest quality. And then the pandemic hits and you need to get stuff out the door. And it's like, quality is the first thing that gets sacrificed, or like, I don't want to bring up the toilet paper scare or the hand sanitizer scare or whatever, right? But people were trying to get hand sanitizer out the door as fast as they could and get it back on the shelves, that they were using like, I don't even know what it's called, like methane or something, like bad stuff that you're not supposed to ever put on your skin. But, for you and for your business, you guys manufacture things. You also, have quality like throughout your lead gen process. I would even imagine there might be a quality standard in the types of leads you have, or, anything. So can you talk just a little bit about how does a marketing operations manager think about quality, and is quality something that you can sacrifice to kind of speed things up during a pandemic like this, or maybe it actually becomes more important during a pandemic? I don't know. What's your sort of take on that?
My personal take is that quality is super important right now. Not all marketers would say that. I think it's going to be unique to their business, but I think you hit on something really important around like speeding things up. And so, there's the concept of an ecosystem, right? And think of it as like a series of gears. And they're like, if you speed one up, and the spokes are different sizes in one gear to another gear, like how does that affect things? And a conveyor belt might, suddenly have a bunch more stuff on the conveyor belt that was previously only capable of handling a couple, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, you have to think about from an operational standpoint of like, what is the impact going to be to the rest of the company if you suddenly increase your volume or drastically decrease your volume, and what that can mean. So, we have looked at, so we used to have a metric around MQLs, marketing qualified leads, where we had a number that we wanted to hit every month. And we decided, based off of looking at the last several months of data, to actually completely eliminate that KPI. We're not even worried about the number anymore. It's all about quality over the quantity. And we are looking at a different metric. Now we're looking at pipeline. So how much money, how many deals and what amount of money is associated with those deals that are slated to close this month, next quarter, next year, sort of thing. Because I'm also starting to shift my mindset around marketing qualified leads into marketing qualified accounts. Because again, going back to this quality over quantity thing, in an enterprise sale, there are on average about 7 people associated with the buying committee.
Yeah.
You know how many people it would take to buy a SaaS solution, within Yubico. There's a security review. The finance team is going to scrutinize it and want to know, are we getting the best discount that we can from a procurement standpoint? You've got operations people that are going to have to manage it, et cetera, right? And the people that the end users of it need to all buy off on it. And so, the quantity thing, the question you should be asking yourself is you have to look at several different data pieces to know if that's the right move for your business or not. And so for us, we looked at the number of people that we have at each, that the lead touches at each phase of the funnel, and decided ultimately, given the size of our sales team, we wanted to focus on higher quality, because ultimately we're already having trouble getting people on the phone throughout this pandemic. They've got kids at home, they've got a full-time job, and they've got a house to manage or whatever else is going on. Plus they may have family members that they're taking care of. So the amount of time that they have to give to a sales rep has gone down. So like, let's really make sure that the quality is super, super good. Yep. I could see though, where from a consumer product standpoint, where quantity, right, just sheer more eyeballs on it could be super important in this time.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like the way you were talking about it, like if you focus on quality, you could almost reduce costs, even in the enterprise sales. Like you talked about, how many people touch a deal, how many people on both sides touch the deal, how many people at Yubico need to be involved in the deal, and then how many people on the buyer side are involved in the deal, and the enormous cost involved in the entire cycle. And that if you focus on the quality and you increase quality, that you're probably going to have more likely success in the sale, which ultimately would reduce costs. Because if you just focus on quantity, you might have so much waste, right? And that's probably true for the consumer side as well. Like we were talking about with the methane or methone or whatever it was that they're putting in there, you may sell a lot, but you may have to recall half of it, so maybe, that sounds kind of, like the quality is not necessarily something that, is the first to go out the door, because it ain't costing you a ton of money anyways.
I can give you an example though, where quantity on the flip side of things is actually a beneficial piece for enterprise. So I was talking with somebody from our customer success team earlier today about how we can scale what it is that their team does. So I think there's 3 to 5 people on that team, and we have thousands of enterprise customers. So that's a lot of customers per customer success manager to manage. Yep. And so they have this very well thought out, high touch, high person to person process or operation for them to do customer marketing and customer engagement, to keep those customers happy and coming back for more. This is a really good time for us to manage our expenses in terms of number of employees, and think about how we can change that high touch process to something that is more one-to-many instead of one-to-one. So relying more on technology to help touch a higher volume, so higher quantity of people. You may end up sacrificing a little bit of quality because some people still really value that human interaction. But the data so far is showing like actually we don't need to spend that amount of money on employees to do customer success.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. And actually that leads us kind of into the next question, and we'll kind of wrap this up with this last question because, looking into the future, leveraging technology, thinking about the trade-offs between quantity and quality, things like that, sort of, with the pandemic here and knowing that this isn't going to go away anytime soon. And even when it goes away, it seems like it's going to change the nature of the way that we work, forever. Like what are some of your ideas about how the future is going to be changed? What do you think about, new ways we're going to find to work together creatively? Maybe are conferences ever going to come back? I mean, so leave us with some, with some words of wisdom.
I think a lot of consolidation is going to end up happening. Some companies just are not going to stand the test of the pandemic and will sell or be acquired. I am not sure that this culture of working from home is going to stick around long term. Some people think that it is. I see another article, 3 or 4 articles every day on Twitter about it. But personally, I think people's memories are short. I'm old enough to remember 9/11 that I mentioned earlier. Very, very sad thing to happen. But we all started flying again a lot sooner than critics thought we would. So I think that it'll be the same for work from home. I think that I hear this all the time. I do a lot of webinars in my job, and I was just doing a prep session right before this one for a webinar I'm doing on the 14th on customer marketing. And, we're all like craving going to events again. So I think it will come back. I do think it's going to take having a vaccine for sure. But it's in terms of the future, I think that there will certainly be some things that stick around. What those are, I think maybe I'm bullish on this idea that people will challenge themselves a lot more, and they'll look to question what they've been doing and what the data says, and can we get these numbers to improve? I think it's really normal in a down economy anyway, which I also think is according to The Economist at least, we're headed for one. So I know that's a bit of a downer to end on, but I mean, one of the things I would say to your students is like, the fact that you're providing this is incredible, and soak this up and take advantage of all of this that you can, because it's pretty incredible. When I started in the workforce in 2008, the economy was in a really bad place too. And that provided me with a lot faster learning opportunities than it would have if the economy had been in a really good place where like jobs were plentiful and everybody was handing out jobs and great opportunities. So stay like humble and nimble and hungry. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, I've talked to a lot of people and we're all hungry for the human contact, that we've missed. Like the initial euphoria of working from home is wearing off, this idea like, oh man, I can, wake up and do a Zoom meeting, in my PJs. Like that was cool for a little while, but it's kind of like, I really miss people. I miss human interaction and talking and just having fun with people. And I think that's kind of like you're saying, like that's going to come back as soon as it's possible. I think people are going to come back, and start hanging out.
Yeah.
So, and these kids, like, we're all doing remote learning right now, and for some of them, it's awesome because they have jobs and it works out really well for them. But for some, like my son, he's, in his second year of college and he's craving the college experience and he's not getting it, and a lot of university professors, have resorted to the, here's a couple YouTube videos and some PDFs, do the work and it's over. And the kids are just not getting the kind of exposure, to the real world that we hope that they're going to get. So hopefully these stories will help them. Thank you so much for coming on, Alex. I really enjoyed talking with you and listening to your stories, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again sometime. Good luck with whatever you've got going on in the future and your family and keep in touch. Definitely enjoyed this conversation.
Yes, same. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I hope everybody stays healthy and safe. And thanks for the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.